When HOA Karen strutted up to my front door with her so-called master key, she thought she could walk right in as if she owned the place. But when it failed, her next call was to 911. What she didn't know? The dispatcher on the line was my son. The morning sun slanted across the quiet cul-de-sac, gilding the manicured lawns and freshly painted mailboxes of the neighborhood. I had moved into this subdivision 6 months ago, escaping the bustle of the city for what I thought would be peace and privacy. My house wasn't the grandest in the neighborhood, but it was mine, bought with sweat, sacrifices, and years of saving. From the day I signed the closing papers, though, I had noticed one thing. The HOA president, Mrs. Karen Whitmore, though everyone simply called her Karen, made it her mission to scrutinize every inch of my property. She was a sharp-nosed woman with a permanent frown etched on her lips, always wielding a clipboard like a weapon. From my lawn height to the color of my curtains, she seemed convinced it was her personal duty to inspect and approve, or more often, disapprove. Still, I tried to avoid confrontation. I paid my HOA dues on time, trimmed the hedges, and even nodded politely when she stopped by to remind me of bylaws that I had already read. But I never let her inside my home, nor did I give her the satisfaction of bending to her nitpicking beyond what was required. That morning, I was in the kitchen brewing coffee when I heard the metallic scrape at the front door. At first, I thought it was the mail carrier fumbling with a package, but the sound persisted, deliberate and mechanical, like someone testing keys in the lock. My stomach tightened. I set the coffee down and walked quietly to the foyer, peering through the peephole. There she was. Karen, standing on my front porch in broad daylight, a ring of keys in her hand. Her mouth moved with visible irritation as she tried one after another in my lock. The audacity made my pulse spike. I opened the door abruptly, startling her. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" Karen snapped her head up, her eyes narrowing as if I had interrupted her rightful duty. "Good morning, I'm conducting an HOA inspection. As president, I'm authorized to access any property under our jurisdiction." I almost laughed. "You're not authorized to break into my home." Her lips curled into that familiar condescending smirk. "I'm not breaking in. I'm using the master key. Every HOA board has one, and it gives us entry when residents are uncooperative." I held her gaze, refusing to step aside. "That's not how it works. My home is private property. You have no right to enter." She bristled, clutching her clipboard tighter. "If you have nothing to hide, why are you resisting? Residents who comply with the rules don't mind inspections." "I'm not hiding anything," I said evenly. "But you don't get to barge into my house because you feel entitled. The bylaws don't give you that power." Her face flushed. She jiggled another key into the lock, and when it predictably failed, she let out a dramatic huff. "Fine. If you won't cooperate, I'll have to call the authorities." Before I could respond, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her voice suddenly shrill with indignation. "Yes, this is Karen Whitmore, president of the Meadowbrook HOA. I have a non-compliant resident who's refusing inspection, and he's becoming aggressive. I need an officer dispatched immediately." Aggressive? I hadn't even raised my voice. She was weaponizing the system the way people like her often did, twisting the narrative to paint herself as the victim. But what she didn't know, and what made me suppress a bitter smile, was that the voice on the other end of the call belonged to my son Marcus. Marcus had been working as a 911 dispatcher for almost 3 years. He had nerves of steel and a way of handling frantic callers with calm precision. He had also grown up watching me deal with people like Karen, self-important, manipulative, and quick to cry foul when challenged. I could hear his steady tone even from where I stood in the doorway. "Ma'am, can you please describe the emergency?" Karen's voice rose, thick with manufactured urgency. "This man is blocking my access to the property. He's hostile and I don't feel safe." Marcus's pause on the other end was subtle, but I knew him well enough to sense it. He was processing, calculating, and most importantly, he was recognizing her lie. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "are you in immediate danger? Has he threatened or harmed you?" Karen hesitated. She hadn't expected pushback. "Well, not yet, but he's uncooperative, and I have authority here. If he resists, who knows what could happen?" I almost chuckled at the desperation in her tone. Marcus wasn't buying it. Ma'am, just to clarify, he continued, his voice firm, you're on someone else's private property right now, and you're attempting to gain entry without their consent? Karen faltered. I told you I'm the HOA president. That gives me the right. No, ma'am, Marcus interrupted smoothly. It does not. HOA bylaws do not override state or federal law regarding private residences. Unless you have a court order or the homeowner's permission, you cannot enter. I could see Karen's eyes widen as the weight of his words settled in. Her phone trembled in her grip, though her pride wouldn't let her back down easily. Karen lowered the phone slightly, glaring at me as if I had orchestrated the entire call to humiliate her. In truth, I hadn't even had to lift a finger. Marcus had dismantled her fabricated authority with precision. She raised the phone back to her ear. Well, I don't appreciate your tone, young man. I expect officers to respond when I report a situation. Marcus didn't flinch. Officers respond to emergencies, ma'am. What you're describing is a civil dispute, and from what I can gather, you may be trespassing. Are you aware that could be considered unlawful? Her mouth fell open, but no words came out. For a moment, the facade of control slipped, revealing uncertainty. I folded my arms, waiting. You heard him, Karen. Maybe it's time you step off my porch before this gets worse. Her nostrils flared. This isn't over. I'll be filing a complaint with the board about your hostility. Feel free, I said calmly, but I'll be filing one too, about you attempting to break into my home. The next week was tense. Karen doubled down on her efforts, sending me letters about trivial violations. My trash cans weren't aligned at the curb. My lawn had dry patches. My mailbox paint was fading. It was harassment, plain and simple. But thanks to Marcus's call log and the recording of her 911 stunt, standard procedure for dispatch, she had little ground to stand on legally. Still, she wasn't the type to admit defeat. At the next HOA board meeting, she brought up my non-compliance as an agenda item. I decided to attend. The room was filled with neighbors, some sympathetic, others indifferent. Karen presided at the head of the table like a queen in her court, flanked by board members who nodded dutifully at her every word. We must address the troubling behavior of Mr. Davis, she began, her voice dripping with self-righteousness. He has resisted inspections, displayed aggression, and endangered the harmony of our community. I stood when she gestured toward me, my voice steady. With all due respect, none of that is true. What did happen was that your president tried to break into my home with a ring of keys she claimed was a master set. When that failed, she called 911 and lied, saying I was aggressive. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's face turned crimson. I continued. What she didn't realize was that my son was the dispatcher. He recorded everything, including her admission that she was on my property without permission. If anyone endangered this community, it was her. I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Marcus's measured voice, Karen's shrill insistence the moment she contradicted herself, it all filled the room with undeniable clarity. When the recording ended, silence hung heavy in the air. Finally, one of the board members cleared his throat. Karen, is this true? She stammered. That was taken out of context. I was trying to ensure compliance. By forcing entry? Another member interjected, frowning. That's not your job. That's not anyone's job here. Neighbors began murmuring, some shaking their heads in disapproval. Karen's authority, once unchallenged, was crumbling before her eyes. I didn't press further. The facts spoke loudly enough. The board voted to remove Karen as president that evening. She stormed out, muttering threats of lawsuits and vengeance, but her reign of intimidation was over. For the first time since moving in, I felt like I could breathe. But Karen wasn't finished, not yet. The weeks after her removal were eerily quiet. Karen no longer prowled the sidewalks with her clipboard. I didn't receive a single violation notice. The neighborhood, once tense with her constant surveillance, seemed to exhale collectively. Children played more freely. Neighbors greeted each other without glancing over their shoulders. I should have felt relief, and I did, until the night she returned. It was just past midnight when I heard the crunch of footsteps outside. I rose from bed, peering through the blinds. A shadow moved across my porch. Karen. Her hair was disheveled, her expression wild. In her hand was that same ring of keys, though she wasn't trying to fit them into the lock this time. She was scratching something into my door with one of them, her movements jerky and furious. My chest tightened. Enough was enough. I dialed Marcus directly. "Son, she's back. She's vandalizing the house." He didn't hesitate. "Stay inside, Dad. I'm dispatching officers now." Within minutes, red and blue lights washed over the street. 2 patrol cars pulled up and officers stepped out. Karen froze on my porch, caught mid-act. "Ma'am, drop the keys," one officer ordered. She spun around, her face twisted with indignation. "Do you know who I am? I was president of this HOA. This house is non-compliant. I have every right—" "Ma'am," the officer cut in firmly, "you're trespassing and damaging private property. You need to step away." For once, her words carried no weight. She was handcuffed, her protests echoing through the night. Neighbors peeked from windows, witnessing the downfall of the woman who had ruled with intimidation for years. The next day, the evidence was undeniable. Scratches on my door, eyewitness reports, the body cam footage from the officers. Karen was charged with trespassing and vandalism. The board issued a formal apology to me and the neighborhood. They assured us that measures would be taken to prevent any future abuse of power. For the first time, the HOA felt like a community rather than a dictatorship. As for Karen, she eventually moved away, her name forever tied to the disgrace she had brought upon herself. One evening, weeks later, Marcus visited me. We sat on the porch, sipping coffee, the quiet hum of the neighborhood wrapping around us. "You know," I said with a wry smile, "when you picked up that 911 call, it was like fate intervened." Marcus chuckled. "She picked the wrong house, Dad, and the wrong dispatcher." We laughed, the sound mingling with the chirping crickets. For the first time in months, my house felt like a home again, not a battleground. And I couldn't help but think, sometimes justice doesn't come from force or fury, but from the quiet, steady voice of truth. And that's how one HOA Karen's obsession with control led to her own downfall. She thought a master key could open every door, but in the end, it only locked her fate. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Hidden Compass Stories, where we uncover the tales of everyday people standing tall against arrogance, injustice, and abuse of power. Because here at Hidden Compass Stories, every story points us toward the truth.